given that we're seeing the cases accelerate in the U.S. right now, what does it tell us about the durability of the recovery? Is the U.S. facing potentially a double dip for the economy?
Well, I think that that's almost baked into market pricing. Well, I shouldn't say market pricing because there's a big tug of war going on between what Jay Powell can accomplish with the stock market versus what's happening in the real economy. But we do have 30.6 million Americans collecting some form of unemployment insurance. That's only come down in the past month from 30.9 million Americans. And these are actually, this is not seasonal adjustment. This is just the absolute number of Americans collecting unemployment insurance. The number is stubbornly high, and the greatest risk as we see some of the largest economies in the country, California, Texas, Florida, start to reclose, that we will indeed see the dreaded W-shaped begin to manifest.
So, I mean, these PPP funds are getting depleted. The U.S. is also approaching this July cutoff date for that $600 weekly top-up for unemployment benefits. So how is the second half going to look like? Can the economy actually recover on its own? Or do we need to see more measures from Jay Powell or on the fiscal side?
Well, I think right now, Jay Powell, given that so many of the facilities that have been provided by the Fed have not been tapped, I think that the onus now falls back onto Congress to pass further stimulus measures prior to the November the 3rd election. I mean, people don't realize how quickly the election is creeping up on us and how we've only got 1 month between now and when the extra unemployment insurance benefits on a per weekly basis of $600 end, and what that implies for rental evictions and car repossessions. So I think that it is definitely, I think Wall Street is waking to all eyes being on Washington, D.C., on Congress, on the administration, and what the next stimulus measure is going to be to tide over the U.S. household sector, again, as the economy begins to reclose.
Danielle, you touched on the jobs market. What does this move now by some of these governors, particularly in states, as you say, like Texas, where they're going to have to put the reopening on pause? What does that mean for the jobs picture going into the second half? How much fragility was baked into the job situation anyway, pre-pandemic?
Well, the problem is that the small business economy that employed 47% of Americans prior to this COVID crisis has been holding on for dear life, waiting to reopen. And now they're being told that they're not being told necessarily that they have to reclose. In the case of bars and taverns, that is certainly the case. But if people are remiss to come back out and join into the reopening because they see these case counts, then that could be the death knell for quite a few U.S. small businesses. A Gallup poll that was taken recently found that 41% of college-educated Americans believed in the efficacy of masks. If that same cohort, which accounts for 60% of U.S. consumption, refuses to join the reopening, then that is going to spell bankruptcy for record numbers of U.S. small businesses, on top of what we're seeing in terms of bankruptcies with Bloomberg's been tracking this very well. For larger companies, we saw Chesapeake has just filed as well, but that's one in a long line of U.S. bankruptcies that are running at the highest level since 2009, the financial crisis.
Yeah, and of course, part of the Fed's action has been to support these companies by buying up their bonds. And we saw the publication of a list including AT&T and Walmart and other companies who have seen their bonds being purchased by the Fed. Is that just an issue or a strategy by the Fed that isn't working its way down to those smaller companies? Is that why you're so concerned about bankruptcies picking up?
Oh, absolutely. You have smaller businesses that are going to opt to stop with the PPP loans, go ahead and close their business voluntarily. The Fed's Main Street lending program never really got off the ground, and it was designed to help much larger businesses than the mom and pop backbone of the U.S. economy that the stimulus simply never did get to in adequate numbers. Right now, the U.S. economy resembles that of a barbell. You've got people who make the least amount of money collecting extra in unemployment insurance, and they're in many cases making more than they made prior to losing their jobs. You've got the largest companies benefited and assisted and boosted by the Federal Reserve, and then you've got those in the middle, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the small and medium business owners who really have been left behind in terms of stimulus measures.
And Danielle, the other moves we've seen from the Fed recently is with those stress tests with the banks, and they're capping the dividends. They're also banning buybacks through September. Do you think that this move was warranted? Does it actually do enough to help, as you say, some of the most needed SMEs out there? And is there room for actually more stricter caps?
Well, there certainly could have been room. I mean, the way that the Europeans went was to prohibit dividends period end. So we certainly were not as stringent as the Europeans in clamping down and making sure that banks had adequate capital cushion to help push the recovery through and help these smaller and medium-sized businesses when they need it the most. So the risk is definitely there. We're seeing credit loss provisions piling up at many U.S. banks, and at some point the piper will have to be paid. These losses will indeed have to be recognized, and you have to wonder what the balance sheets of the banks are going to look like. There have been some very good reports out over the last few days about the high concentration of commercial real estate loans at U.S. banks and what this implies as that industry moves, as we've seen so many worldwide, move in a very rapid pace compared to prior economic cycles when you would see real estate play out very slowly. That's not the case. So we really have yet to see the last domino fall.